Not I got into a fight with Team Breezy. And they were trying to lie and say that they weren't Team Breezy. But it's like, the thing about being Team Breezy is you don't have to buy the albums at this point. Like, let's just call it thing a thing. Like, Chris is still famous. Like, he never stopped being famous. And I feel like one of the most tragic parts about this is that there are so many women who really will think like, oh, like, you know, and it's so sick. But I know we saw that. I know we saw people be like, oh, Chris Brown could beat me up. Like, people thinking that was funny or cute or even acceptable. Like, that's, like, there's always been, like, people giving into the patriarchy and unfortunately giving into misogynoir. But it's so bizarre to have people, like, go up for Chris or be like, people are being hypocritical with Chris. Like, they're not holding white people accountable. It's like, whoa, why are you worried about white abusers right now? Do you campaign for white abusers? Like, are you uplifting how white people are abusing on your page? Because a lot of times it's a derailment tactic, just to make you sit here and go, well, that's right, white people aren't being held to the same standards, not realizing, why are we dropping our standards for anyone non-white? Why are we dropping the standards for fucking care around black women? Like, that's the conversation. Like, that's the thing. That's the insidiousness of being like, what about white people? The whataboutism, it doesn't work. It doesn't play. Because if we know white people are all racist, if we know white people have been operating under racist ideologies and racist assumptions, then can't really compare to them at all, ever. Like, if we know that white people have set up, or the institution of white supremacy has set it up to where everybody non-white is experiencing a different level of anti-blackness depending on proximity to whiteness, then we can't really be ever comparing anybody to white people, because, like, they're the oppressor. They're always the oppressor. I think that's one of the things. It's like, white people can't really be oppressed and oppressor. They're always the oppressor. In fact, they're either the oppressor or they're the super oppressor. That's how I'm seeing it. Like, they either oppressing you, and this, it might seem low stakes, or they're oppressing you on multiple fronts, and it's like, damn, how can I transform this moment? How can I get out of this systemic oppression when it's not just one system?
World where there are white people who actually believe within their souls, their deepest convictions, that they are better than people of the global majority. They actually believe that. Where men believe they're better than women. Where cis people believe...
Oh, I'm not done with Christopher Maurice Brown. I just wanted to say that, like, there is a desire to hold Chris Brown in a way that, it's nostalgic. Like, I feel like Beyonce and Chris Brown and a lot of these, like, even Kanye, like, those three, I would say, are, like, they are nostalgic artists. People are still holding on because they're like, oh, you made me so happy when I was a baby, when I was a child. Like, you brought me happiness. You brought me a way out of the trauma, the sadness. Like, you offered me some guidance with your audio files. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like there's this nostalgia that some folks are really being, I don't want to say played by, but that is what's pulling the strings in terms of, like, how folks are reacting about these people. Like, that's really the longest bag. And I feel like Mariah Carey understood that. Like, you gotta find a way to ingratiate yourself with the youth, with the children, with the fucking holiday. Like some of these artists realize, like, you got to become iconic in a particular type of way by either, utilizing the holidays, utilizing family, utilizing blackness. Like, there's so many ways that, like, stars, artists, especially mixed ones, can, like, just seem like they're really, like, cool and down to earth and people that you want to support. And I think Chris Brown is low-key a cautionary tale about what gatekeeping should look like, because Chris Brown is not black. They're not. Their mom is mixed. Their dad is perhaps a black man. But Chris Brown being a mixed man who stays talking about he's light-skinned black. Honestly, I remember when he came out with that song called Freaky Friday, where he traded places with Lil Dicky. And I'll never forget, like, he sang this line talking about, you know, I'm light-skinned black. Like, making it a point to be like I'm light-skinned black. Like, I'm not the oppressed black, okay? And I'll never forget that shit. Like, I'll never forget that shit, because it was a moment where I was like, damn, Chris Brown, like, you are being out loud and colorist again. And again, yes, like, he is light-skinned, but he's not light-skinned black. He's a mixed man. And again, there's a way that us mixed people be moving in black spaces. And I'll even clock on myself. Like, I literally just saw a tweet from 2020 that I put out there. Woo! And I used, and I'm not laughing, like, I'm just like, damn, like, as much as I want to be moving better, I just kind of got reminded that, you know, there's a lot of ways that you are already moving that you should be exposing. There's already things that you've said and misinformation you spread, and ways that you've moved. Like, I got into a back and forth with this white lady who called me out, and to be honest, she was right to call me out. Like, she was right to call me out for the word that I used to describe this person, because it wasn't my word. Not even wasn't my word to use. It was not a word that I should have been using. And funny enough, not even funny enough, it's not funny. This white person was asking me if I was black, and I was like, wait, so, like, you're thinking that I'm racist? You're wondering if I'm black? Like, you're white, so why are you asking if anybody's black? And honestly, in that moment, I was causing harm. This white person was actually, I don't want to say doing what they're supposed to do, but they weren't wrong. And I'm not making excuses, but the tweet was about Kanye and how he's been anti-black. And again, I used a word that I should not have used to describe his behavior, referring to a woodland creature, just so folks know. Have more of understanding, not even more understanding, like, be understanding. Like, I'm just saying, like, just so you know, like, I wasn't out here, you know what I mean? But it doesn't matter, because I feel like even, like, ways that we think we're not being anti-black, like, they can be. Like, no matter what we may think, it's not on us. Like, my brain can't always know what's anti-black. I'm not a black person, so I'm going to fuck up. And when I fuck up, it makes sense for me to just be like, yeah, I fucked up. Obviously, that didn't happen in that moment. And it did not happen. And, you know, I'm trying to hold space for how to move forward with that. Like, I'm very much trying to delicately broach topics, but also hold space for the fact that there's some shit that I just don't need to even be talking about. And I feel like, as much as, like, everybody critiques Kanye, I feel like when he popped out, you know, I feel like there were so many times Kanye popped out, but I've definitely been very critical of Kanye. And in retrospect, like, you know, there's other people saying better things than me. So I'll hold that, like, I didn't need to tweet about Kanye. There's so many good tweets about Kanye. And I think that that's just how I want to hold certain conversations, like, just not have them, just not even offer my thoughts, just be uplifting what other people are saying. Because, you know, in retrospect, like, I didn't need to comment on Kanye, and when that person called me out, I really could have just held space for what they were saying. But instead, I stratified the one drop rule, and instead of just holding space, because that's the other thing too, is, like, there are white people who have principles. There are white people who have principles that can definitely, like, snatch my ass. And I can't be acting like I have the authority over white people to tell them stuff. Like, I just feel like that is not what I need to be doing or how I need to be moving. But in that exchange, I was definitely, like, gaslighting this white person, like, you don't know if I'm black, like, you can't tell, but you're wondering if I'm being racist. You know what I mean? And it's like, whoa, it's like, babe, that word that you used wasn't your word to use. That white person calling me out, that's real. Like, I just feel like it's a very delicate topic, seemingly, because nobody wants white people to talk to them about anything. But at the same time, if a white person sees some harm unfolding, and they call it out, like, I just feel like that white person did the right thing. And in retrospect, I owe them an apology. Like, at the end of the day, like, I don't think, like, I was watching this video last night about about the struggle that's happening in South Africa, or has been happening in South Africa, with white people being delusional. And one of the white people said something that I really appreciated. They were like, yes, all white people are racist, but let's not stop there. They're like, white people need to keep asking, like, and how do we stop being racist? And what do we do next? And it's like, yo, I appreciated that, because it's like, I be saying all white people are racist, and I know motherfuckers be getting defeated. And I don't be meaning to defeat you. I'm just saying, like, the system is going to system without you, babe. So I need you to put a motherfucking wrench in that bitch. I need you to study the system. And I need you to put a fucking boot in that bitch. Fuck up the gears. Like, I need you to gum up the line. And so, I know for my own self, I have so much, like, to think about and to communicate, but not, like, I think that's a part, not even I think, that's a part of, like, light skin privilege, is, like, there's not many people that are going to tell me no, or tell me to shut the fuck up, or tell me I'm wrong. And that is not okay. That is scary as hell, because I've been wrong as fuck, and people just didn't say. And it's not just because people are, like, afraid of, like, backlash. It's also because what if that's where you're at, babe? Good luck. Like, nobody exists on this earth to be getting you in alignment or getting you together. Like, that's, again, it's not on anybody to be reading for you, learning for you, unlearning for you. It's not on anybody. And so if folks are doing any labor for you, just say thank you and send them a fucking snack. Like, just be grateful, because there's a lot of work that's being done for you that's fucking you up. A lot of people putting shit into your head that ain't right. Getting back to that part about Chris Br0wn can be the oppressed or oppressor, and how white people are always the oppressor. What I'm trying to say is, you know, in regards to, like, my roommate, right? Like, they're a white person, but they were naming that they had some Native ancestry. So that made me see them as potentially being oppressed in ways. They're also a trans person who is in the middle of transitioning, so that also made me see them as being oppressed in some ways. So you have to look at it like that. Like, Chris Br0wn is oppressed in some ways, but as we see by his actions, his lyrics, the way he treats his partners, the way he treats black people. Look at the news recently. He was just really questioning a fucking veteran in his career, in his industry, and just because you hadn't heard of him, meanwhile not realizing you haven't heard of this man because of colorism. And this is a little bit off topic for somebody, but just the same way that people will be like, Beyonce was robbed, and that's like a type of delusion for a light-skinned mixed person, the way that, like, Chris Br0wn will, like, throw a tantrum and people will really be like, y'all are always picking on him. Like, I swear, Beyonce and Chris Br0wn, they're very different people. I'm not comparing them in many ways, but the delusion of their fan base is just so bizarre to watch. Genuinely. And I don't mean it to be rude to anyone who loves Chris Br0wn or Beyonce. I'm just saying, like, the mental gymnastics behind their behavior and how they're moving, and just, like, the again, the nostalgia of it all. Like, I remember Yo. Like, that was like, don't get me wrong, like, I remember a lot of bops by abusers. But I think the standards for us light-skinned people who are mixed is very, very, very low. And so Chris Br0wn really don't got to do shit. Like, Chris Br0wn could really abuse another person, and people will still be like, they're picking on him. No one's picking on him. In fact, quite the opposite is happening. People are picking on people who are uplifting what he's done. And another thing. Just kidding. But I did have one more thing to say. You know, when it comes down to it, Chris Br0wn is a famous person who has been able to get away with so much. Has been able to get away. People talking online, that's not the police. That's not the law. That's not litigations. It's not even the fucking county court, man. This ain't even small claims. Like, I want us to like really think about why rich people are so bothered by communicating about the harm they've done. Like, are they mad because they harmed people? Or are they mad because of the impact it could have to their finances? Let's be candid here. The way the privileged respond to call out is it's evident. Like, raising our standards means listening to what the privileged and those who have oppressed folk actively are oppressing folks are saying. And Chris Br0wn literally just questioned the validity of a Grammy winner because he didn't win a Grammy. He questioned someone else's talent and validity in their field because he didn't see it. Do you see how he's an oppressor here? Do you see how he can oppress here? Do you see other ways that he's been oppressive? These things tell us who he values. When he sings his songs, who does he say he loves? Who does he say he wants to be around? Let's listen. Like, come on, this is so easy. He's telling us how he feels. Like, I love y'all so much. But no celebrity is above you. No celebrity is more important than you. No person that has access to mass communications and mass media is without critique. And if folks are getting angry about uplifting facts of abuse that's detailed and documented, and there are photographic evidences, then there is obviously a war on the truth. There's a war on speaking out. There is oppression happening to people who do not have a lot of power to speak out. Like, imagine being a millionaire and you're angry that someone is uplifting your past that you couldn't pay to scrub away, and then invoking that there's some anti-blackness afoot, that you're being held to a different standard. Meanwhile, you have not changed your behavior at all. People are still naming how you are still harming because you're still harming. People would genuinely shut the fuck up if you would stop harming. But it's at a point where people can no longer ignore how much you've harmed. And I think that says something even more sinister. That there is a threshold, that there is a limit in the sky for us mixed light-skinned people to do whatever the fuck we're going to do. Because as soon as somebody calls us out, we have minions, we have people who will say that they see our heart, that they see our purpose, they will see our halo, they will see our worth. This is not happening for deep, dark-skinned black people. It's just really not. This threshold does not exist. This threshold that us light-skinned people are able to, reach for constantly with our behavior is just not afforded to deep, dark-skinned people. Like, you do not need to do much as a deep, dark-skinned person for folks to just decide that you are worthy of discarding. And so we just really must be mindful about the ways that we hold mixed folks like myself, like other folks who are in, putting themselves out there to be consumed by the masses. We must be mindful of how folks are oppressors and can be oppressed. That every moment must be appraised, actually. And if folks are invoking blackness when they have the opportunity to very much open up conversations about literally anything and blackness last, we must really be mindful about how folks are utilizing their privileges and using them to harm or using them to uplift. And I feel like it's not anybody's fault, really, that like when you look at the landscape of like social media, that like people are pandering, people are showing you what they want you to see about them, even to some degree, like me betraying my light skin privilege. Like, I'm not always betraying like the ways that I've thought, the ways that I've shared, and I'm trying to do that whenever I name like how I see another light skinned person is moving. I try to uplift the ways that I've done something similar or ways that I've moved as well, because I want to just illustrate that it's not just rich light-skinned mixed people. It's not just light-skinned people who are mixed with proximity to any kind of status. Like, it could be a regular light-skinned mixed person next to you that you've known your whole life that is employing their privilege. And I think it's important to also note that if, like, Chris Br0wn wasn't Chris Br0wn, if a lot of these, like, light-skinned mixed celebrities who invoke blackness weren't who they were, people would get very clear very quickly about their privileges and why they don't speak for blackness. Like, society, unfortunately, will uplift us mixed light-skinned people as an authority on so many things. But outside of that realm, there are regular ass mixed light-skinned people who do take that they see that and they replicate it in their own ways. And I'm speaking from my own experience. Like, there's a reason why, like, after, like, people are telling me I'm looking like Beyonce with this wig, I'm, like, going hard wearing lace fronts. I'm going hard into, like, doing, like, beauty and beautifying and centering beauty culture and centering wigs and looking quote unquote hyper feminine. Like, once my privilege was being tapped in a certain way, I leaned into it, and I wasn't thinking about the ways that I was encroaching in black spaces. I wasn't thinking about the ways that I was adopting black language or black vernacular. I was not even worried about causing harm, because I was feeling so entitled to the space. And that's not out of thin air. Like, there are people who are collaborating against blackness, but specifically black women, and deep dark skinned black people, period, in order to not necessarily replace, but be installed and centered and utilized. And there is language that's been coming out that's very eugenics based and eugenics centered about how mixed people will be in, or how everyone will be mixed, and that is alarming. That is white supremacy being repackaged. The fascination with people like Meghan Markle and, like, the Real Housewives of Potomac girlies, like, that's not just because, like, they're fascinating people. It's because we are constantly, as mixed people, throwing black folks under the bus and reigniting conversations about race and who is black again and again and again and again. And again, because there are no black people being centered in this conversation or in this space, us mixed people every time are getting these, opportunities to speak, opportunities to spread misinformation, and it's happening a lot more. So just be aware of, like, when a mixed person is speaking. And 9 times out of 10, if you cannot tell if someone is mixed, if you're not aware, that's not on you. Like, a lot of mixed people are shifting into whatever tribe, quote unquote, makes sense or is being projected onto them. So there are white passing or just white looking people who are mixed, who are feeling alienated by whiteness, feeling like they are going to stratify the one drop rule for their betterment. And you'll see it more and more the more you think about, or not even think, the more you listen to deep dark skinned people, the more you look into colorism as a system, the more you'll be aware of just how deep it goes, because there's mixed people literally everywhere. And sometimes the mixed folks are not uplifting their mixedness because they are not being seen as mixed. So as far as they're concerned, I'm not going to say what people aren't saying, even though they know they are mixed. Therefore, their lens is as a mixed person, and that's not a bad thing. I think that mixed people can share a lot of information about things that we've seen, because people don't appraise us always as the most marginalized. But we can also be used and utilized by white supremacy. And so, again, keeping a running analysis on, like, your behavior and, like, how you're talking to people, especially people who are marginalized and people who do not have the agency that you have, it really does really make you hold space and move a lot gentler, at least in my own experience. Just being aware of, like, how marginalized folks are not afforded the ability to just say what the fuck they feel, because there are people like myself who will spread misinformation and or have this hive mentality that will have people attacking. Like, I recently found this YouTuber who made a bunch of videos being like, it's like really from the perspective of like mixed people who are comfortable calling themselves exotical. And they're actually like bullying in the video. I reported it, but the video was very much a mixed person talking about how monoracial people or people who are not admixed are angry. And it's so sad because it's like, it's just more anti-blackness that we're feeding into. This concept that anyone's mad, that like, first of all, the concept of weaponizing anger as if it's not like a normal emotion everyone should have access to. The fact that like when someone who is deep dark skinned is like rightfully upset, frustrated, annoyed, all of that gets boiled down to anger. Even though like, you know, if someone was angry, they couldn't really sit there and make a video about all of what's going on. Like, I'm not saying you can't, but I just feel like anger usually doesn't allow you to speak clearly. So it's kind of just like, huh? I'm not saying anger never allows you to speak clearly, but because it is such an anti-black take, my thought process is just kind of like, yeah, like you're naming anger, but when I watch this content about colorism, I actually feel like it's coming from a place of, you know, not even just like deep research, but like lived experience plus listening to other deep dark skinned people who are in group who have had similar experiences and who share candidly about what they have experienced. And then on top of that, just a layer of editing and care taken to creating the content. Like, it's very rare anyone who is speaking about colorism who is actually affected by it, asterisk. They're not making jokes, they're not like, they're taking it very seriously and they're holding the space very particularly. And so for folks to be naming that as angry, it's just pure anti-blackness. And so us mixed people have a lot of reading and listening to do more than anything. But I think when it comes down to like harm in the community, it's not just white people. And that is like what I am trying to hold, is that like I can be an oppressor, I can be harming, I can be witnessing harm and allowing it. Like, there's so many ways that I've been utilized, and not even just in the context of like white supremacy. Like, there have been folks who are fellow queer people who have like exploited my desire to connect and be in community with black folks and be in solidarity. And it was hard to know who was or who wasn't, because I was giving myself a lot of authority instead of reaching out and collaborating and asking questions. I'm gonna dip back to white people because I can. But as I was describing earlier, like, when you start to see a white person, like when you start to see like a white person that's not just white, you're like, oh, you're a white woman. You know what I mean? And maybe you're still invested in like gender essentialism, gender community, whatever the fuck, you know what I mean? And so maybe you're like, okay, like as women we're gonna connect, you know. Maybe you're seeing them as a white disabled person, or like as disabled people we're gonna connect. Like, the reality is, yes, white people will have intersections of marginalization, but they will never be the most marginalized of whatever marginalization that they're a part of. You feel me? They're never going to be the most oppressed in any marginalization that they also hold. And so, unfortunately, some white disabled people are not in alignment with black disabled people. Like, there are some white queer people who are not in alignment with black queer people. Like, it's like every systemic oppression has a least oppressed and a most oppressed. And so when we start to see ourselves, you know, standing in the crossroads at times between harm and liberation, or faux liberation, because if the most marginalized is not liberated, what the fuck else what else is happening? You know what I mean? If people are marginalized, then what is everybody else? And if we're privileged, are we free? Are we liberated? No. So that's kind of what I was trying to get at as well. It's like white people can be the oppressor always, right? But when they're not a woman, or they're not a queer person, or they're not a poor person, like, we can start to distance ourselves from that white person in a particular way. However, when the white person is a woman, when the white person is queer, when the white person is poor, we start to say, oh, well, maybe we're connected. And we could be. But that opportunity is not being offered by the oppressed or the most marginalized. We are not... My bad, y'all. I love playing this game. But we are not able to offer the opportunity to the privileged. When you're marginalized, you're not able to offer opportunities to people who are a part of harming you, who have power over you. That's on them to be working towards with you and collaborating with you. And so I just want us to just think about ways that some of us are not at the most marginalized end of an oppressive group, and yet we are the most cared about, the most listened to, the most loved, the most paid. You have to really start thinking like that, because we're not going to be able to just be like, looking at people as what they, we can't look at anyone as a monolith, and that's very fucking important. But we also must be aware of the ways that folks are also oppressors and oppressed, because that is an identity that a lot of people have not been uplifting enough, and myself included. I definitely was leaning heavy into the ways I was oppressed, and I feel like because of that, I was very much out of touch with the ways that I have absolutely caused harm, am still causing harm, will cause harm in the future. Like, these are things that need to be uplifted. This is not to say that I want to cause harm, or that I wanted to cause harm, or that I'm wanting to cause harm. This is a reminder that I'm never done learning the ways that I can be harmful. And if I keep my mind open, and if I keep reading, if I keep listening, if I keep holding space for the ways that my actions could be interpreted multiple ways, not just one type of way, and not just by one lens, that is when we actually start to in my opinion, hold true self-awareness. When we start to be aware of other people being aware of us. That is, I truly believe, true self-awareness, because we're not pulling from our own biased, unobjective viewpoint. We're actually collaborating with people around us and validating and uplifting what they're seeing. With that being said, I'm going to share these thoughts on YouTube because I do think that, not that they're important, but I do think that exposing ourselves when we have oppressive ways of thinking and behaving, it can be really helpful for folks who are also seeing us as similar, seeing us as relatable, seeing us as in community, seeing us as friend, in your head or not. These are things that, if more privileged folks were doing, the work of the oppressed would be cut in half damn near, because there would be less trying to gather evidence. There would be more reading and analyzing how folks are moving and just going. There would be less suspicion and less question marks. There'd be more just, alignment and swift moving ahead. Nobody needs to be pedestalized to a point where nobody needs to be causing harm and be on such a pedestal that they're above reproach, and being able to deplatform people or just cut their money is such a colorist and classist thing. We see how quickly DaBaby was just out of there, and not for being abusive, honestly. It took a minute for them to be truly canceled, and I think that that's a whole nother bag of beans. But I do think that as quote unquote long as it took, it was actually quite short. And shorter than a R. Kelly, shorter than a Chris Br0wn. It's, you know, but I also think, like, you know, had folks felt like they had paid dues, like had folks grown up with the baby, because I also think about like whose lens is being held. Like, I look at, you know, Drake. How could he be deplatformed? How could like we see how quickly you know, Kanye was deplatformed. And when I say quickly, I don't mean like it was truly quick. I just mean that he was canceled for specific things, despite the fact that he had been, you know, being overtly anti-black for a while. There has been you know, ways that the system is disproportionately more aggressive, but I feel like the system being aggressive is really on some colorist shit. I feel like the ways that deep dark skinned black folks are able to maneuver, I feel like Kanye is really an outlier. Truly an outlier. But then again, I do think that you can be harming certain people in the community and people really don't give a fuck. And so as much as they're an outlier, I think that it's not necessarily about protection. I think, like, when we talk about certain groups of people, like, there's a conversation about how, you know, Kanye had been anti-black, but that didn't get him canceled. But, you know, when he made comments about Jewish people, that was, like, a big deal to people. And when people say it was a big deal, I think that they're not understanding that, like, you know, Kanye was still you know, good in the eyes of white people. I feel like that's the thing. Like, when you get to a certain level of fame, it's not black people that put you there. Like, yes, black people loved you and loved you perhaps first. Perhaps. You know, perhaps that is like how folks want to frame it, that like black folks got you started, but once you get to a certain level, like, you see them pandering to the white people. You know what I mean? And I just want y'all to just pay attention to a lot of these light-skinned mixed celebrities. Like, they are pandering to whiteness because they're not trying to lose that racist white coin. Like, no celebrity is making music for one demographic of people. They know who their main demographic is, and they will pander to your, you know, the main demographic, but they're also looking at, you know, money, demographics abroad. Like, I just want folks to just consider why certain celebrities say black when they say black, when they don't say black. Like, all of those things are a concert, a strategy, obviously at this point, because, you know, like, as more and more black folks are sharing online, it's been out that, like, a lot of the lack of sharing has been, you know, a prioritizing of mixed and light-skinned people, not a lack of desire to exist or shine or be in the front. It has been a systemic, traumatic erasing of esteem, bitch. And so when you think about it that way, like, there's been so many systems of harm against deep dark skinned folk that when we talk about people who are abusive and are mixed, it would really behoove us to just be candid about how the one drop rule can be weaponized. And that right there is a conversation that is not being had. That the one drop rule may have been created by white people, but who been using it? Who been operating that shit? And who's been benefiting? Just consider why people are saying certain things and who they want to hear it. And why certain times when shit's going on, very quiet, very all lives matter. It's all strategy, and it's very bizarre. This is my last point, I'm gonna go. But Impressive, the Impressive Channel, I feel so weird because, like, I feel like I saw that channel start and grow from, like, a little channel. And I used to really appreciate it. There's just something about hearing a black person tell you something or talk to you, especially on YouTube. And I feel like that, you know, that could be explored more. But there are just ways that I want to hear the news, and I do not want to hear a white person tell me the news 9 times out of 10. Especially if they have a black scent, especially if they're appropriating AAVE. Like, there's just some shit I don't want to hear. And so I appreciated Impressive Channel because I felt like they were saying some real shit. But I kind of knew when they started having that relationship with Cardi that something was off. Low key, I'm not trying to be mean, but Cardi is an energy vampire. No shade. And it's weird how Cardi moves. And I'm not going to go too deep into it. I try not to talk about people I don't really fuck with like that. Because honestly, what's the point? That's how I feel. Like, what is the point? If I don't like somebody, if I don't like how they're moving, you know what I mean? Chris Br0wn I'm going to talk about because it's relevant today. But for the 9 times out of 10, I don't talk about Belcalis. But, you know, I also don't talk about her because I know how, like, just unhinged she is about being mentioned, and just how when people talk about her, she feels very much like you can't talk about her. And it's so fascinating because, you know, first of all, who are you? And second of all, I think that it's really fascinating how she's been able to benefit from the one drop rule and stratify it and weaponize it to her benefit. And it's very much an commented thing. I remember early on in the career, people would be like, why is Cardi always mad? Like, who cares? You're winning. And I think that that's part of it, is like, you know, you could be a light-skinned person doing very well for yourself, but if you're a mixed person in black spaces, like, I really do think that the ways that we get to maneuver is just very, very, very fucked up. And before anybody tries to drag me, we all know Cardi is mixed, very mixed, not black at all. And that's okay. But the way that she talked about her Trinidadian mother, you would have thought that was a black woman. And I just think it's very fascinating, like, how you know, people will say Trinidadian, Jamaican, like, they'll name islands, but those islands have so many mixed people on them, babe, that I just want folks to just hold that folks really do not even know what the fuck they're all the way saying about their own fucking ancestry and lineage, and let alone race. And so Cardi is unfortunately one of those people who is, you know, manipulating. And I believe she knows she's manipulating, because she did say in an interview that she likes to date black men. She don't like to date quote-unquote Spanish men. So she sees herself as quote-unquote Spanish, but when convenient, she did start to acknowledge that one of her parents is from an island that people associate with black people. I'm not saying there's not a lot of black people there. I'm saying that her mother is not black. And by people saying, because like even myself, I used to tell people my dad's Jamaican, and they would automatically assume my dad is black. My father is black. However, just because my father is black does not necessarily mean that Jamaican communicates that. And so it's very important to acknowledge that there's ways that us, again, mixed people, will name things that are not synonymous. But getting back to Impressive Channel, like, I felt like the connection and alliance with Cardi was weird. And I felt like, I don't know, I feel like I stopped kind of watching. Not necessarily intentionally, but I just was kind of like, you know? And then recently I tuned in just on a whim. I don't even know how I fucking found the channel again. It just popped up for me. And they were talking about Chris Br0wn. That's why it's topical, yay. And the Chris Br0wn video was so... I don't want to take sides. Like, that's what it felt like very fence righty. And it made me very uncomfortable, because it's like, how do you compile all of this information to do a video about Chris Br0wn and why there's backlash? And then you, as a black woman, and you know what? They're saying that they're a black woman, or, you know what? They never said they were a black woman. However, I will say this. Those channels where you don't know who the fuck's talking to you, you can't see them. I hate that. I really hate that, personally. Because you really don't know who, like, where their lens is coming from. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes you really don't know. And so I think that was something that really bothers me, or is bothering me, because I don't know what informs their politic, but I do know this: they are an abuse apologist. Like, they really had no personal critique of Chris Brown being shitty. It felt very much like, this is just the news, you guys. And I also want to say that I've seen this critique that, like, people can really care about everything. Like, I've seen that be a critique in response to this, that, like, people can't be reporting on every segment, every bit of news or information with a personal connection to it that would make them react strongly. But I feel like if you're a femme person and this is a masculine, male identified abuser, I feel like just on your privilege of having a platform should be really there should be no question about what you should be saying or how you should be uplifting the content. And so there's just this, like, unbiased / I don't want to get dragged by Team Breezy vibe. And honestly, that's also valid too. Like, not wanting to get dragged by a fucking platform of a mixed light-skinned person who does have a lot of minions who will come to their aid. And I feel like that's, again, going back to what I was saying, that it's not like there aren't deep dark-skinned people who don't have things to share on the platform or ways that they want to create. It's really a level of colorism and anti-blackness that is constantly at bay. And so if a deep dark-skinned person says, quote unquote, the wrong thing, aka the truth, aka how they feel based on lived experience, people will really gaslight. People will really make it seem like us mixed people, us light-skinned people, us non-black people will really spin a tale. And so that is something that I do need to be mindful of, that, like, they could really just, be towing the line of certain things because they want to avoid being bullied and harassed. That is really a thing. However, once you have a huge platform, I do think you owe it to your audience, which you can absolutely see who it is. Who's watching your stuff. You owe it to your audience to be candid about your lens and where you're coming from. If you just want to share the news, I wish people would feel comfortable to say that. But the thing is, people don't feel comfortable to say that, first of all, because of bullying, but also because of the money. Hello? Nobody really wants to just watch just news. People love impassioned commentary. But then again, I have been seeing a rise of channels where people just, like, share TikToks. I'm like, damn, imagine getting, like, paid off of content that you didn't even have to create. You just get to sit there and be like, there's an interesting conversation unfolding. And, like, I guess there is work in curating the videos and getting them all together in one place, but there should be some shared equity there. Anyways, I'ma go, but I had so many thoughts about Chris Br0wn. I have so many thoughts, but I'm gonna let y'all just, say how you're feeling. I genuinely don't give a shit about Chris Br0wn. I don't think about him at all. Whenever he pops out, I'm like, he's still alive? What the fuck? I thought the crack rocks had taken him. That's so mean. I shouldn't have said that. But I just don't fuck with him. I think that he's really trash. And, I just hope that, like, the baby's got money, Like, I really hope the baby's got money, because I know it's a couple of them out there. I know somebody ain't claiming that man, but they got his baby. I know. I just hope they getting their money, That's all I want, is for them little light skins to just get their money for therapy, babe, because that's about to be a lot. That's a lot. They're about to have to carry so much. That's too much.